It was still early morning when bright yellow sunlight spread across the dry fields on the outskirts of Maasai Mara Reserve in Kenya, creating a surreal landscape of burned grass and cracked earth. Mariah, a passionate naturalist dedicated to wildlife conservation, was surveying the terrain searching for traces of wildlife during this dry season when most animals hide from the scorching sun. The dry air was thick and stifling. Large irregular cracks cut through the parched ground like scars on the desert's face, testifying to the prolonged drought that had plagued this region for recent months. Suddenly her steps halted when she noticed a small, hunched figure pressed against an abandoned brick wall of an old building that once served as shelter for herders. It was a young lion, thin as a skeleton, with matted fur and dull eyes full of exhaustion that spoke of long days struggling for survival. On his back was a large, red and glistening wound with peeling skin and irregular fur loss, resembling remnants of some terrible nightmare, probably caused by another predator's attack or accident. The body trembled with exhaustion, but eyes still stared at the stranger with vigilance mixed with instinctive fear, characteristic of a wild animal that had learned not to trust anything in this harsh world. There was no trace of his mother, and around him only the sound of wind whistling through dry and withered grass could be heard, creating a melancholic melody of abandonment. Mariah approached slowly, maintaining safe distance to avoid frightening the young lion, her experience working with wild animals telling her how important careful approach was. A wave of compassion flooded her heart, and she knew she could not abandon this small life to fate in this merciless land. Mariah knelt slowly, calling to him gently with the softest voice she could produce, trying to mimic sounds a mother lioness might make for her young. The young lion cowered even more, back pressed against the wall as if seeking the last trace of protection in this cruel world that had abandoned him. She opened her backpack and extracted a bottle of cold water and a white, soft, clean cloth that she always carried for encounters with injured animals. She placed the fabric on the ground, pushing it toward him as a harmless greeting and sign of good intentions. He tilted his head, blinked several times, sniffing the new fabric and unfamiliar warmth emanating from this foreign being who seemed different from all the dangers he had experienced. Mariah extended her hand slowly forward, making no sudden movements that might frighten him and force him to flee. Strong sunlight revealed every protruding rib beneath thin and delicate skin, showing how malnourished this small predator was. The young lion licked dry lips, his eyes turning toward the water jar with undisguised thirst that spoke of days spent without access to clean water. Mariah poured some water into the bottle cap, gently placed it on the ground before him, and stepped back several paces, giving him space to approach. After several seconds of hesitation, he lowered his head and drank in small sips, his gaze becoming gentler than before, and a spark of hope appeared in his eyes. Mariah smiled with relief when she realized the barrier of fear was slowly disappearing between them. She quickly reached for her radio and called the Maasai Mara Animal Rescue Team, requesting urgent help for this young lion. The rescue team's specialized vehicle appeared within 30 minutes, carrying 2 experienced veterinarians with years of experience rescuing African wildlife. They approached cautiously, one kneeling gently to examine the infected wound on his back, which appeared to be a serious infection requiring immediate treatment. A dose of painkiller was immediately administered to help him relax and better tolerate the manipulations that would be necessary during transport. The young lion remained motionless, eyes fixed on Mariah as if seeking familiar safety in her presence. They gently placed him in a special cage, lined with soft fabric and completely disinfected, designed specifically for transporting injured wild animals. The cage door closed, and the vehicle departed from the abandoned brick wall, taking with it a new life that needed urgent help. Mariah sat beside him, her eyes following him through every second as if afraid of losing him after she had already begun forming an emotional bond. Through the glass window, dry and burned pastures stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, creating a monotonous landscape of African savannah. Inside the vehicle, the sound of air conditioning and smell of disinfectant created a tense atmosphere, but also provided hope for professional medical help. At the rescue center, they immediately transferred him to a quiet and clean isolation room designed specifically for injured wild animals. Soft lighting and cool ceramic floors helped him feel less uncomfortable after the long and exhausting journey from the dry fields. He was placed on a veterinary table with all treatment instruments ready to begin comprehensive treatment of his wounds. Mariah remained at his side, not taking her eyes off him for a moment, her presence seeming to calm the young lion in this foreign environment. Doctors began cleaning the wound with special antiseptic solution to prevent spread of infection that could threaten his life. Fur around the wound was shaved to facilitate monitoring of the healing process and ensure better access to the damaged area. They changed dressings, injected antibiotics, and administered intravenous fluids to restore this small warrior's depleted energy. Mariah came to the center every morning early, bringing appropriate and nutritious food adapted to the young lion's needs. The first meal was thin porridge made from ground meat, easy to swallow and rich in energy to restore physical strength. He ate slowly, but didn't waste a single bite, as if afraid of losing the survival chance that had finally appeared for him. Each day, Mariah talked with her charge to create a sense of security and connection between them. The wound gradually dried. A new thin hair began growing around the scar's edge, showing the healing process was progressing successfully. His eyes gradually brightened, replacing the initial clouded gaze with clear intelligence and vital energy. He began rising, walking unsteadily but with greater confidence at each attempt, his muscles slowly regaining strength. Doctors were pleased seeing that the healing pace significantly exceeded initial prognoses and expectations. Mariah named him Kito, meaning small in Swahili, a name that reflected both his size and the place he occupied in her heart. Kito recognized Mariah from afar, making welcoming sounds each time she entered the room. The trust bond between human and animal strengthened, paving the way for the next step in the rehabilitation process. Kito was moved to a large open enclosure that simulated the natural Maasai Mara environment with trees, grass, hills, and plenty of space for running. Staff hid food in various places to help Kito practice search and hunting skills that would be essential for survival in freedom. Initially, he was clumsy and needed much time to find food, but after just a few weeks, hunting instinct clearly returned. Kito's body became firm, his fur gradually gleaming in morning sunlight, showing return to health and vitality. Mariah limited contact so Kito could learn independence and avoid relying on humans in the future. Monitoring cameras recorded that Kito knew he should stay away from potentially dangerous species and other threats. He also knew how to find shade when the sun was hot and locate water in natural puddles after rain. Rangers assessed that Kito was in sufficiently good condition to survive in nature independently. A special day was chosen to release Kito on Maasai Mara pastures, where he could begin his new life. Mariah prepared mentally for the inevitable moment of separation, which was as difficult for her as it was important for Kito. The ambulance took Kito to a vast pasture area, far from residential areas and crowded tourist zones. Wind carried the scent of fresh grass and moist earth after night rain, striking his face and reminding him of the wild nature that was his true home. The cage door opened. Kito slowly stepped out, deeply inhaling the fresh air of freedom. He stood for several seconds, turning his head to look at Mariah with a deep and unforgettable gaze. That look contained gratitude and persistent nostalgia that was difficult to express in words. Then he turned away, blending with the infinite yellow of wild pastures, where he belonged as a wild predator. Mariah watched until the small figure disappeared behind distant hills, carrying with it hope for new life. Bird chirping and wind rustling were like a gentle and warm farewell to this chapter of their shared story. A new journey was beginning for Kito, where nature was his true home and he could live according to his instincts. Mariah returned to the rescue center, continuing her mission of saving other defenseless creatures who needed her help. Each time she thought of Kito, she smiled because she had done something good and meaningful for the natural world. She believed that every saved life was a valuable sample of hope for wildlife's future. Love and patience had transformed a life on the brink of death into a story of complete recovery and freedom.